Welcome, listeners, to another deep dive with us. Today, we'll be taking a look at the world of Zen Buddhism and running. Specifically, we'll be diving deep into Laura Shapiro's book, Zen and the Art of Running.
It's a fascinating read, Instead of just focusing on the philosophy of Zen, Shapiro actually gives us practical ways to use these principles when we run, like in our everyday running lives.
I was really intrigued by how Shapiro deals with, those days when we lack motivation. He talks about mindfulness, right, as a way to get over those mental hurdles.
Exactly. He says mindfulness is about seeing the difference between, well, facts and our own reactions to those facts. Like, let's say you're running when it's cold out. The cold is a fact, but our dislike of the cold, well, that's just our feeling.
So we don't try to pretend we don't feel cold.
No. It's more about noticing that feeling without getting swept up in it. And this leads us to another big idea in the book, attachments.
This is where it gets really interesting. I love how Shapiro uses the example of someone who's afraid of dolls, maybe because of something that happened in the past. He says, look closely at the doll. It's just cloth and buttons and string. There's nothing scary about it on its own.
Right, and he wants us to do the same thing with our running. Like all those excuses we use, I'm tired, it's too hot, I don't have time. Are those really true, or are they just attachments, like beliefs we've gotten stuck to?
So to get past those motivational blocks, Shapiro says we need to do two things. One, we separate the facts from our feelings about those facts. And two, we see what beliefs we might be attached to and try to let them go. Does he give us any examples of how this works in real life?
He actually talks about his own struggle with running in the afternoons. He lists out all the reasons he doesn't want to run then. Like, he's tired after work, he wants to relax, he hates dealing with traffic. And then he digs deeper to find the attachments behind those reasons. He realizes he believes that being tired means he can't run, that relaxing is always better than running, and that traffic is always a bad thing.
Like he's pulling those feelings apart to see the beliefs that are underneath.
Right, and the important part is he doesn't stop there. He makes a choice to see things differently. He reminds himself that he can still run even when tired, that running can actually be relaxing, and that traffic, well, it's just traffic. He doesn't have to let it ruin his run.
So think about your own running, listeners. What are your afternoon run moments? Those times when it's tough to get started. Can you use Shapiro's process to see the facts, the feelings, and maybe choose a different way to look at it?
It's a really powerful technique. And Shapiro also talks about another challenge many runners face, which is balancing running with family life.
It's always a juggling act, trying to fit in the miles and still be there for loved ones. How does Shapiro approach this from the Zen perspective?
He makes an interesting point. He says that runners often see running as a need, like sleeping or eating, not just something they do for fun.
Which can cause problems with non-runners who think it's a choice, right? Like you're choosing to run instead of spending time with them.
Exactly. And that's where this Buddhist idea of dukkha comes in. Dukkha means suffering, and Shapiro says it happens when our desires clash. In this case, it's the desire to run clashing with the desire to be with family. So how do we deal with these competing desires without constantly feeling that dukkha? Shapiro uses his own experience as an example, trying to balance work and running and being a dad. He introduces this Buddhist idea of right effort, which means turning those bad feelings, guilt, resentment, frustration, into positive actions.
Can you give us an example of how Shapiro used this right effort in his own life?
Well, he realized that he was taking his stress from work and putting it into his runs, and then he'd get resentful of his wife, because she wanted him to spend more time with the family. So, using right effort, he looked at things differently. He started appreciating what his wife was doing and focused on fixing those work problems, and that actually made him feel less need to escape through his runs every day.
It shows how being more aware of ourselves can really lead to positive change. It makes you think, listeners, what are your reasons for running? Where are the conflicts, maybe with family or other things you need to do? Could this idea of right effort help bring more balance to your life?
It's a great question to consider. Now, moving on to the heart of Shapiro's approach, he talks about making Zen part of the running itself, and that's where meditation comes in.
This is what I found really unique about Shapiro's book.
Mhm.
It's not just about thinking differently off the track. It's about bringing that Zen mindset into every step you take.
Exactly. And there are so many benefits. Meditation helps us build mental discipline. It helps us be more mindful and use that right effort when we run. It makes us more aware. So running becomes more than just a physical activity.
I've tried meditation, but I always find my mind racing. It's like trying to keep a bunch of puppies in a box. How can we actually make meditation part of our lives?
It's definitely a challenge. Shapiro says the key is to start slow and be patient. Don't worry if your mind wanders, that's normal. Just gently bring your attention back to your breath. He even suggests giving those thoughts a name, just acknowledging them and then letting them go.
But a helpful tip. So once we've gotten better at meditating, how do we use that when we're running? Shapiro calls it Zen running. But how does sitting still and focusing on your breath translate to actually hitting the pavement?
Think of it this way. The feeling of each step you take becomes your focus, like your anchor. As you run, pay attention to how your foot lands, how it pushes off, how it lifts again. It's a small change, but it keeps you in the moment.
Like turning the run itself into a moving meditation. And while we're in that mindful state, we can use those techniques we learned, like naming thoughts and letting them go.
Exactly. And this control over our minds, it helps us deal with the tough parts of running, that hill that feels impossible. It becomes less about the burning in your legs and more about the power in each step.
It's about staying present in the run, and that's often what leads to that runner's high feeling everyone talks about.
And Shapiro takes this even further with something he calls awareness training.
I'm curious about this awareness training. Can you tell us more about it?
It builds on meditation, but focuses on one specific thing. The goal is to see that thing without all our past experiences and opinions getting in the way.
Shapiro uses a really funny example to explain this. He talks about how he used to hate mayonnaise.
That's one of my favorite parts of the book. He describes the mayonnaise in such detail, the color, the texture, the smell, and how all his past experiences had made him dislike it so much. With awareness training, he looks at the mayonnaise really closely, and he strips away all those judgments until he just sees it as this white, shiny blob.
So he doesn't suddenly love mayonnaise sandwiches, but he can see it without that automatic yuck reaction.
Right. And then he makes this brilliant connection to running. If we use awareness training on our body, on the aches, the pains, the little injuries, we can overcome all those mental blocks we have.
So instead of freaking out at every little twinge, we can make smarter decisions about training and recovery based on what we're really feeling, not on fear.
Exactly. This awareness lets us tell the difference between discomfort that's just part of running and pain that means something's wrong. It's about listening to our bodies without overreacting.
It sounds like Shapiro's giving us permission to just be with those feelings without letting them control us. Changing gears a bit, I want to talk about training. Shapiro's very clear that there's no one right way to train.
And he introduces a Buddhist idea that's a great guide for how we train. The middle way.
Can you explain the middle way? What does it mean for runners?
It means avoiding extremes. So not pushing yourself cautious. It's about finding that sweet spot where you challenge yourself, but you don't get hurt.
Can you give us some concrete examples from the book of how this middle way works in training?
He talks about finding your middle pace for speed work. This means slowly increasing the speed you run at during your workouts and finding that pace you can hold for the distance you want without burning out.
So it's not about going all out every time, but about finding a speed that pushes you, but you can keep up.
Right. He also talks about finding your middle hills for hill training. So it's about finding those hills that give you a good workout but won't, completely wipe you out.
I've definitely had those hill workouts where I felt defeated before I even got to the top. It sounds like the middle way is about being honest about what we can do right now and then slowly pushing those limits without having setbacks.
Yeah, it's about finding out what works for you. Shapiro encourages us to try different things and really think about our goals to see what really fits.
He's giving us permission to ditch that no pain, no gain idea and be smarter about how we train.
Uh,
And of course, we can't talk about running without talking about the mental game, especially when it comes to racing.
oh, absolutely. All those pre-race nerves, doubts about yourself, that urge to go out too fast. It's like a whole mental marathon before the real one even begins.
Shapiro does a great job of breaking down those anxieties. He talks about that restlessness we can feel during the taper, when our bodies are ready but our minds are still in training mode. And he talks about those doubts that creep in. Did I train enough? Am I setting myself up for failure?
Every runner, no matter how experienced, has felt those pre-race jitters, I think.
I think so too.
And this is where those Zen practices we've been talking about become so important. Meditation gives us a way to calm that mental storm, to find some peace in all the chaos.
Like finding that stillness inside us, even when everything outside is crazy.
Shapiro actually gives us real tips for using meditation before a race. He says, find a quiet spot, Close your eyes and focus on your breath, those same techniques we talked about earlier.
It's a reminder that even with all the excitement and anticipation of race day, we can still connect with that quiet place within us.
And once the race starts, Shapiro talks about what he calls racing in the moment. It means letting go of worrying about the finish line and just paying attention to how the run feels right now.
So instead of thinking about how many miles are left or what your time might be, you're just experiencing each step, each breath as it happens.
Exactly. This can help us shut out those negative thoughts that pop up. I'm too slow. I can't keep this pace. I want to quit. By staying present, we don't get pulled under by those thoughts.
It's about trusting the work we put in and being fully in the experience of the race.
Shapiro even suggests a technique for dealing with pain. He says to actually describe the feeling, the tightness in your chest, the burning in your legs, to separate yourself from it.
Like you take away its power by naming it, but without judgment.
It can be incredibly powerful for getting through those tough parts of a race.
Well, Shapiro has given us a lot to think about. Mindfulness, right effort, meditation, awareness training, the middle way, all these tools we can use to completely change how we approach running.
He's encouraging us to see running as more than just a physical thing. He sees it as a path to knowing ourselves better and finding inner peace.
Before we wrap up our deep dive today, let's give our listeners some key takeaways. 10 things to consider as they start their own Zen running journey.
Love that idea. First, be mindful. Pay attention during your runs. Notice your thoughts and feelings without judging yourself.
Second, use right effort. Turn those negative emotions into something positive. Find that balance between running and the rest of your life.
Third, make meditation a regular practice. Build that mental discipline, and you'll see the benefits in your running and everywhere else.
Fourth, find your middle way when it comes to training. Avoid going to extremes. Figure out what training style works best for you.
Fifth, deal with those pre-race nerves by using meditation and visualization. Find that inner peace amidst all the excitement.
Sixth, practice racing in the moment. Stay present in the race experience. Focus on the way each step, each breath feels.
Seventh, don't let injuries or aging get you down mentally. Reframe how you think about them. Embrace those changes as part of life.
Eighth, don't be afraid of discomfort. It's just information from your body. Use awareness training to make smart decisions about your running.
Ninth, remember that running is a journey, not a destination. Enjoy the process and recognize how far you've come.
And lastly, think about what it means to be a runner, even when things change. Let your relationship with running grow and evolve as you do.
That's a powerful thought to leave us with.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Zen and the art of running. We hope you've learned something new and are excited to bring a little bit of Zen to your own running practice.